My name is Maurice McDermott. I'm president and emeritus here at the Witte Museum. And I have, it is my great, great joy and honor to introduce the great Aaronetta Pierce, who yes, we should do. Yes. Aaronetta, who I have admired from afar for years. And then over the last 3 decades, Aaronetta has become a close mentor and friend. Similar to many of you here today, I rely on Aaronetta to articulate the right and wrong with the world, and I follow her in every path she blazes. Most recently, igniting the Witte's exhibition, Black Cowboys, An American Story, and of course, this conference, Ode to Juneteenth Slavery in Texas. Aaronetta was the chair of the steering committee for the Black Cowboys exhibition, along with her beloved husband, Dr. Joseph A. Pierce, who passed away just months ago. She was as well a chair of the steering committee for this conference. And when I say steer, I mean it, right? Do you all know that? Aaronetta is a bold leader who for 40 years has been an advocate for the arts and cultural inclusiveness of African Americans. She works on committees and boards, including at the Witte. She writes essays and makes speeches to make a strong case for extolling the genius that is the African American legacy. Aaronetta has served on numerous local, state, and national panels, and as I said, boards and committees, but mostly as chair. She was Mayor Henry Cisneros' appointed founding chair of the nationally renowned San Antonio Martin Luther King Commission, as we all know, the largest in the country, and also chair of the Blue Ribbon Committee on the Arts. That is when I first met Aaronetta, and I still have the column she wrote that made the winning case for the Department of Arts and Culture in San Antonio, which did not exist before she made it so. Not surprisingly, Aaronetta was inducted into the Texas Women's Hall of Fame, and also a barge on the San Antonio River bears her name. She is the 1995 recipient of the Girl Scout Trifle Award and the 2010 NAACP Community Service Award, and many, many other awards in between and since. Most relevant to today's talk is that Aaronetta, along with her late husband, Joe, has been a collector of African American art for many decades. This impressive collection includes Market Days by artist Johnny W. Banks, the signature piece you've all seen for this conference on slavery in Texas. Aaronetta will no doubt reveal the story of how she and Joe began to collect African American art, but I must note that as a museum board member of the San Antonio Museum of Art in 1987, Aaronetta was influential in bringing the first survey exhibition of African American art to San Antonio, entitled Hidden Heritage, Afro-American Art, 1800 to 1950, was curated then by David C. Driscoll. Today, Aaronetta will use her arts and culture wisdom and prowess to reflect on slavery through art. Please welcome Aaronetta Pierce.
Good afternoon. I was glad to have you be interested in listening to Maurice. She's a friend, so you have to take that into consideration. But thank you. Years ago, I was getting ready to make a presentation at one of my Link conventions, and a lot of my Link sisters are here. I'm sure you can raise your hands. And I said to my good friend David Driscoll, and if I talk about my good friends, it's because I've been blessed to do this work and to know the people who make it happen. I said, David, I want to have them understand that this is something important. I said, what can I say? And he used these words, and I have repeated them many times. He said, to tell them that art is not a luxury. It is vitally at the core of life. Every artist gets up every morning, and he has to do what is before them, whether you like it or not, whether it's appreciated or respected or not, whether it's sold or not. Art reflects life. In times of dread, and these are the words of Toni Morrison, artists must never remain silent. This is precisely the time when artists go to work. There is no time for despair, no place for self-pity, no room for fear. We speak, we write, we do language. That's how civilizations heal. And as I speak in a museum that has a great deal of wonderful, important artwork, a lot of it that represents Texas, I continue to say those words. You have to realize that during the Middle Passage, my ancestors came to this country with only their bodies and their minds. Yet, they had the same motivations, the same creativity, the same inspirations that allow any people to create art. It existed among them. For 6 years, I served on the Texas Commission on the Arts, and John Paul Baptiste shared a word with me that I often also repeat. Art, this is why we need art in the schools always. He said, art is the mirror that allows the troubled soul to find the beauty within. And I've thought about that for a long time, and we have continued it. This is a picture of Johnny Banks on the screen. He is the local folk artist who created this particular work that you have seen as a part of the advertisements that Maurice alluded to in her introduction, and it is an artwork called Market Days, if you will. There is an important story on the screen, and there's a lot of detail on the screen. I began my work at this museum in 1980 as a docent. And I knew that I was interested in it, and I didn't know which side of the stage I would eventually stand on. But going back to those days, we learned a lot about how to talk about art. And this is a work that has practically no negative space in it. First, I want to mention a few things about Johnny Banks. I will first say that there is a friend here who knows his work as well as I do, Gary Houston. I don't know where Gary is sitting, but he and my husband and I spent a lot of times sitting in the home of Mr. Banks, listening to him. Some of his work, a friend of mine just mentioned recently, is a little whimsical because he could draw, as was his wife, a lovely, sharp lady. And he could make her look even sharper, and a lot of his women looked really sharp. But he was a very serious man who drew from his memory. He died about 30 years ago, and he was active on the east side of San Antonio, and it was incredible because we wanted to help him get recognized. There is an area of art that's called fine art, and some art is called folk art. I don't know that I would designate it that carefully, separately, but I would say that it's all art. And Mr. Banks, the difference is that many folk artists come to the arts late in life. He did. He was probably in his late 50s or 60s before he began to draw or to create art. And he did it a lot from his memory, and he did works from that he had been told. He grew up in a small community that was a free community, I think, that was created by African Americans that had been freed from slavery. It's a little town called Sweet Home, and it's near Seguin, Texas, not very far from here. And he learned a lot. They didn't have television and all those kinds of things, and they lived multi-generational. And he talked to his family. He learned a lot about what happened in the past. I don't know about you, but I hope that we can teach our children to talk more to their grandparents, because there are many conversations I wish I had had. At any rate, Mr. Banks was a wonderful, wonderful man, and I'd like to say that my husband was so excited to discover the work of Johnny Banks. And I know that he is thrilled today that I am talking about him. My husband actually took Mr. Banks to Houston to see a folk art exhibit so that he would understand that he was an artist and that his work was appreciated, and it was shown in museums. And there was a tree by the side of the road that he had my husband stop so that he could draw a picture of that particular tree. And incredibly, he said, that tree is not dead. It has lived out its life. And that is emblematic of the kind of spirit, the kind of understanding of the past and life's journey that I think is exemplified in this particular work. I wrote down a lot of things about this particular piece because I didn't want you to miss anything. When we were interested in doing an exhibit on slavery, I remember when we were doing the Black Cowboy exhibit, it was easy for me to remember that we had a sculpture called the Black Cowboy. And it's out front of the exhibit now. And it's actually done by Jonas Perkins, who is an African-American artist of this area. And we were very proud to lend that to the exhibit for that particular exhibition. And then when it was time for this exhibit, Maurice and I were talking, and I said, you know, I have a work of art that does speak to this period. And what is more symbolic than this particular work called Market Days? Because that's what slavery was. Slavery was selling bodies as property. And this is what this particular work reflects. Mr. Banks, as I said, he drew from, he had 2 or 3 encyclopedia. I don't know, Gary, if you remember, but I don't remember. He didn't have a set. Maybe he had 3 or 4 books of a compiled encyclopedia, and he used anything that he could find as inspiration for his works. And he also used the Bible a great deal. He was a very religious man. And these were all the things that were true of folk artists. And so we were really proud. And my husband, we took a lot of pictures of his work and brought them to Cecilia Steinfeld, who was a legend in this museum. And Cecilia said, oh, I love the work. And that was all we needed to hear. And we were all involved in his first exhibition. I will say that I believe the picture of Mr. Banks that just was shown was taken by Gary Houston. And it was shown in a book that I brought today and didn't bring to the stage, but it's called Folk Art in Texas. And one of the things that we wanted to make sure for Mr. Banks was that he got as much documentation as he could. There was no subject that was more dear to him than the story of slavery. He had talked about it with his family. He had been told stories about the past, and so he drew from his memory. And the elements that are in this particular work, I think, are extraordinary. Now, some of them you may see on your own. Some I may have to tell you about. But I love his trees. I mean, he makes this look like really a bucolic kind of pastoral setting, if you look at it just at a glance without seeing the elements, because the trees are lovely, the walkways are beautiful, and the little houses in the background, he thought to include the slave quarters. And in the slave quarter doorway, if you can see it there, way in the back, there is a lady standing in the doorway. I mean, she's very concerned about what's going on out front. He has drawn the blocks that the gentlemen are standing on, and he has put ropes around their necks because they're connected. And it's everybody's turn to walk onto the slave block. He has shown us the concern that the families have for the separation after the sale, because they don't know if they'll be going to the same location or not. They don't know if they will be together or ever see each other again. So you see that there's a lot of hugging and sentimentality going on. The couple in the forefront, and again, one of the impacts of folk art in particular is that sometimes the relationships are naive, in that you would not expect the people out front to be as small as they are in that particular setting. He has people who are expressing what's happening in a very spiritual term, that this is a loss. This is going to be a great loss. He has a gentleman standing to the right in his suit. It looks almost like a herringbone suit, but he's holding his bag of gold or his coins, and in the other hand, if you look at it very closely, he has a paper dollar. So he can play on any team. He can, if you're taking paper dollars, he can get it, and if you're using coins, he can or gold, he can use that too. And just in case anybody tries to run away, there are gentlemen standing around with their guns ready to stop the men from being sold. And then the auctioneer is holding up a piece of paper, and on that paper is a list of the people for sale. And he has them numbered. It's 1 through 7 or 8 that you can, if you have the right amount of money, you can buy, or you can wait until a little bit later. But one of the most interesting things that he has is down in yellow, in the right-hand column, he has written the quote from the Bible. It's Jeremiah chapter 30, verse 6. It says, "Therefore, all that they devour shall be devoured, and all thine adversaries, every one of them, shall go into captivity, and they that spoil thee shall be a spoil." I think Mr. Banks says spoilt, S-P-O-I-L-T. "And all that prey upon thee will I give for prey." And those were the kinds of details that he put into that particular work of art that is very symbolic. And it is often an asset when we can use a picture to tell a story, a work of art to tell a story about a conference. And truly, it tells us that one picture is worth 1,000 words. This is Market Days Again by Mr. Banks. I have some other selections of his that I would like to share with you as well. And if you will progress this one is called Juneteenth. And it's interesting. We have works by several artists who have done a Juneteenth, and none of them, it's in the style of the artist. None of them look very much like the other. But I have found that they all have certain elements. I don't know if they did this on the very first day because they didn't probably have all the ingredients necessary to play baseball. But there's always a baseball game going on. There's always barbecue. There's always some kind of music, and there's merriment. If you learn today what slavery must have been like, as people were considered 3/5 of a human, as well as less of a value. then it does make you stop and think. Excuse me. It's challenging. At any rate, the jubilation, the excitement of Juneteenth, I never heard of it, and I grew up in Tennessee, but I married a Texan. And so one of the works on the list of the bibliography is by Dr. Robert Prince. Dr. Robert Prince was a obstetrician and gynecologist, but he wrote a book on Texas and slavery. And in his book, he talks about a lot, does he say, about the experiences of growing up with what he had heard from his family about the enslaved. But it reminds us the jubilation that must have existed. And the first Juneteenth I went to was at his home. And obviously, ever since then, I've known what Juneteenth meant. And being a Texan, you know very, very well. It is symbolic of a subject that you're going to hear more about before the conference goes on. But Juneteenth is a very celebrated work, and several artists have done a great deal about it. This is his version of Juneteenth. Next slide, please. He also did everyday life, and I think that when we see the kinds of colors and excitement and enthusiasm that has gone into planning works of art that are about everyday life, you tend to value. I know that many people say, where are you going? It's a journey. The whole process of living every day is exciting and it's special, and it's something that should mean a lot to just that experience of that day, and that going forward, it's something wonderful that becomes then a memory. But this one is particularly called Sweet Home. And this is the community where he grew up. And in all of the little communities that I have seen, and there's a scholar here, I forget her name now, who talks about some of the freedom colonies that were communities that were created by freed slaves. They would kind of go not far from where they were, but many of them had to walk. Maybe they had a wagon, but wherever they could go to settle, to find a homestead, someplace that they could live. And this one was called Sweet Home. They would build a church, a school, and in this case, they have a windmill, not a windmill, a water tower, and the homes. But I love the tranquil trees and nature that he was able to give to the works. We can go to the next slide, please. This one is called the Cotton Gin, and obviously we know that this was something that he painted more cotton picking scenes and more cotton gins and more scenes like this, and it seems like people can't get enough of them because it is what most people think of slavery. And the fact that Texas, after the revolution, the Texas Revolution, became the largest producer of cotton in the United States. And when we stop and think about it, we have to realize that we had to celebrate it in Dallas with a big bowl, with a big football game every year. It's called the Cotton Bowl. And so he drew so many of these, and they're different, but if you look at the expressions on people's faces, it's work. And they were about the work, and they did it routinely from sunup to sundown. From can see to can't see is what they used to call it, because it was the day. Whatever was bright, by the time they got home, I heard some of you saying they were very, very, very tired. The next one is the Southeast Cotton Pickers in early 1900. And the next one is Home Sweet Home. And I just love that he thought this is home sweet home. All the elements of the home that we take for granted, he has immortalized them here. And the next one, I think, is really unusual. We won't take time to go through all of this, but he did about 3 of these. and it's called, what will you be doing on that great day? And that's the religion in him that says, when God comes, what will he find you doing? And so he has all these little vignettes of activities that you could be doing when you meet the Lord. And these are examples. I thank Maurice for signaling this out and for having us talk about art, because this was an artist who actually was creating out of his history and the stories that have been told. And he would be so amazed that we're talking about his work 30 years after he's gone and celebrating it here and talking about slavery. It is monumental. And I'm so proud that we are able to talk about Mr. Johnny Banks of San Antonio, Texas, in this particular conference. Thank you very much. As we celebrate art in slavery, it is also wonderful that Dr. Kimberly Monfort at Trinity University is going to come and help us make a presentation in her own words about some of the spirituals that were created as a result of slavery. Dr. Monfort is an associate professor of music and director of the African American composers. She's a 16th, she studies at Trinity University. She teaches at Trinity University. Her research interests include gender studies, popular music, and film music aesthetics. In addition to her work on Baroque sacred music and African American music, she also has time to teach. She has had articles published in the International Dictionary of the Black Composers, 16th Century Journal, and the Journal of 17th Century Music, as well as having her essays in numerous publications. Dr. Monfort is committed to making the arts accessible. For example, she has developed an audio description program for people with blindness or low vision for live theaters here in San Antonio. We are immensely proud to have Dr. Monfort speak to us about the spirituals, those meaningful songs that evolved out of the enslaved experience. Please help me welcome Dr. Kimberly Monfort. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Okay, let me see if I can get this. All right, I need to get my timer up here. So first of all, I want to thank Aaronetta both for the lovely introduction and also for the invitation to participate in this program. It's so amazing to see all of these faces out here who are interested in this topic. And I not only want to thank her, but I'd like to thank the administration and staff of the Witte who've made this all possible, as well as the sponsors who have contributed. Okay, the sponsors who have contributed to this. So thank you all so very much. These are stories that really need to be told. Thank you. So I'm going to start with an opportunity for audience participation. So you've all been eating, and I'm going to give you a chance to actually use your mouths, because I don't want to just give facts. You know, that's really easy to give, and there are some interesting things that I think you'd like to know. But what I think is super important is to give you a sense of what this music meant, how, what it felt like and what it expressed for these people who were forcibly transplanted to North America. So many of you will know what to do. And if you don't, you can just watch and listen for a little bit, and you're going to pick it up quickly. So I'm going to get started. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. Swing low, oh, you got it. Sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. I looked over Jordan, and what did I see? A band of angels coming after me. Swing low, sweet chariot. Swing low, sweet chariot. Coming for to carry me one more time. Swing low, sweet chariot. Coming for to carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariot. Coming for to carry me home. Yay! Excellent. And I hope you're giving yourselves applause. That was wonderful. So I think it's important to say about the singing experience that what we're doing is kind of recreating what took place often at the slave quarters on many plantations, particularly here in Texas. I don't know if you recognized it, but the majority of you were participating in this. You were singing. You might have been kind of been looking around. You might have been nodding. You might have been putting a little shoulder action in there. But the idea is that this idea of participation is one of those Africanisms that we see the transplanted Africans to the New World bringing with them. And that idea that if you can, I can't remember which tribe said this, but if you can talk, you can sing. If you can walk, you can dance. And the fact is that everybody has that obligation to contribute their energy to whatever musical activity that is taking place is an important one. And you did it. Yay, you. Another thing that I want to bring to your attention is the fact that you might have heard me kind of improvising a little bit. And that idea that we're all participating in this as a group, but we're all contributing our individual expression to it. And so some people might do a certain way, and other people might choose another way, right? Another thing that you might have noticed as we're listening to this, as the words, it's grounded in reality. It's grounded not necessarily, even though this is Christian language, it's not grounded in this Christian idea of a heaven after death. It's grounded in this reality of people hoping and wishing and praying and having faith in the idea that they can have freedom in this world, in this lifetime, or the lifetime that they're living in. And that's an important thing. If you take nothing else away from that, I hope that you'll grasp that a part of what they're bringing with them from their African homelands is this idea that there's no separation between God and the world, between the spiritual and the mundane, and that it's all interconnected. And so when they're praying for something, they're praying for the spiritual and physical reality. Okay? So as I talk a little bit about this, I just want to make sure that this is kind of clear. All right? So first of all, I'd like to just mention a few things about spirituals, and then we'll get a chance to hear some of these things. These are one of the main bodies of knowledge recording the thoughts and feelings of the community of enslaved Africans, created as they participated in the process that Christianized them, and as they struggled to retain spiritual connections with their homeland and with each other. Traditionally, they're viewed as songs of religious faith, but they go far beyond these narrow and religious boundaries. They're essentially folk songs of freedom and faith in the inevitability of freedom. They're chronicles of the enslaved experience, and they're quasi-religious songs of longing and aspiration. So how did these come about? How did we see the growth of this type of material? First of all, singing hymns was actually an important means for white evangelists to transmit their religious messages to people who couldn't read, or at least couldn't read their language. The slave contingent that was brought to the revival tents and the camp meetings would learn the songs that they heard there, but they soon developed their own way of singing them. And as we think about some of the spirituals that you may know, the sources of the music and the texts often come from white hymns that were reworked, improvisations by groups of enslaved Africans in everyday life, just creating and improvising and making things up as they go along, the natural world, and the Bible, particularly Old Testament prophets and the travails of the children of Israel, of the Israelites in Egypt. These would be reinterpreted in light of the African Americans' own experiences in the slave communities in the South. One of the best known spirituals is probably Go Down Moses. Yeah, didn't a lot of you have heard of that? And this song's direct and powerful and immediate appeal for human liberation exemplifies this theme and the thread of freedom that runs through most spirituals. It's been associated with Nat Turner, the leader of a slave revolt in Virginia in 1831, the bloodiest of over 250 North American slave revolts. In fact, the message was so clear that most slaveholders forbade its singing on their plantations. And people like to sing, so feel free to join in as I sing a little bit of this so you can hear it. When Israel was in Egypt's land, let my people go. Oppressed so hard they couldn't stand, let my people go. Go down, Moses, way down in Egypt's land. Tell old Pharaoh to let my people go. So, and feel free to sing. So as you're listening to these texts, remember that we have this religious connection. We have this connection of a story from the Old Testament that anyone throughout the United States at this period would know and recognize. And obviously there's layers and levels to what we're hearing to this for enslaved communities. So as you're listening to these words, one of the things I'm going to keep coming back to is that, yes, they're songs of religious aspiration, but then there's a lot of different ways that we have, okay, I think I can do this. There's a lot of different ways that we have these songs being utilized. And that song, the Go Down Moses, it was incredibly popular and widespread because it demonstrates not only this inspiration that enslaved Africans got from their identification with the Israelites, but also show that freedom for them was this physical potential that I'll keep mentioning over and over again in this world, and not merely an otherworldly aspiration. So as we think about these, I'd like to talk a little bit about the types of spirituals that you've probably heard and maybe not known exactly how they were categorized. And one is so basically there's three textual types, and they kind of overlap sometimes. The first are sorrow songs, which speak of past and present trials and tribulations. They're often couched in the suffering of Christ or Old Testament figures, and they embody the enslaved African's identification with that suffering. A very common, popular one is Were You There? And I'm just going to sing just a little bit of it for you. I'll sing from here. Were you there when they crucified my Lord? Were you there when they crucified my Lord? Oh, sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there when they crucified my Lord? So imagine this song, these people identifying with the tribulations and pains of Christ. And then the next few verses were you there when they nailed him to the cross? Were you there when they pierced him in his side? Were you there when he hung his head and died? Imagine how those verses would have resonated for people for whom whippings and brandings and chains were a fundamental part of their lives. And then Christ's transcendence of that, overcoming, would also speak to them and have an aspirational, motivational, inspirational power, particularly after singing songs like this. Another type of spiritual would be jubilees, so kind of flipping the switch a little bit. And these kind of express joyful expectation of a better life in the future, or jubilation for present and future blessings. Here's an example. Lord, I keep so busy praising my Jesus. Keep so busy praising my Jesus. Keep so busy praising my Jesus. Ain't got time to die, 'cause it takes all of my time to praise my Jesus. All of my time to praise my Lord. If I don't praise him, the rock's gonna cry out, glory and honor, glory and honor. Ain't got time to die. So these are jubilees. You can get this sense of joy even among troubled times, which would hearken back to these African ring shouts that they managed to maintain in the New World. The third type are cult spirituals, sometimes called coded spirituals or signal songs. I think you might have heard that terminology. And they kind of overlap with the other two types. But they're often used for coded messages between and amongst themselves. Communications that could be concealed from the white master class. And these are words that have conventional Christian meaning, but also one or more meanings for the enslaved singers, words that expressed their pains, supported them in their continued perseverance, and encouraged their continued striving against the system of slavery. In them, we hear words that are used over and over again, developing many layers of meaning over time, and I'm going to give you just a few. So if you hear spirituals talking about God's people or the Israelites, that's often, in their minds, referring to the enslaved Africans. Moses was a leader or deliverer. Egypt or Babylon represented the South, and hell, the Deep South, sorry. Pharaoh was a slave owner. The River Jordan was the Ohio River, or any similar body that separated the free and the slave states. Home, Canaan, camp meeting, or the Promised Land were Africa, the Free States, Canada, or Liberia. And any agency of travel or movement, trains, shoes, wheels, chariots, spoke of escape. So, coded spirituals could give instructions for escape, telling escapees the best time of the year to attempt it, ways in which they can connect with conductors on the Underground Railroad, and how to shake pursuers. We started today with one of Harriet Tubman's favorite spirituals, Swing Low, Sweet Chariot, which was sung to let potential escapees know they had to be ready. As rescuers, a band of angels, with the Underground Railroad, the Sweet Chariot, would be coming south, swinging low, to take them to freedom in the north, to carry me home. Another spiritual that I'm going to sing for you, and feel free to join in as you have been, is Wade in the Water. And it has several layers of meanings. Some authorities connected the lyrics, God's gonna trouble the water, with the account of a miraculous healing by Jesus in the Gospel of John. It took place at this pool where at irregular times, the pool of Bethesda would begin to agitate, and then the first person to enter in was healed of whatever disease they had. So the message was that within the troubled waters of life, there was healing because God troubled the water. Does that make sense? Yeah. So another layer is that when escapees are being tracked by hunters with dogs, moving into the water covers their scent, allowing them to move through the water and emerge further along the stream. hopefully to freedom. So as with many spirituals, it combines providing comfort with ways to navigate a journey to freedom. And I'm going to sing that one too, and feel free to join me. Wade in the water, wade in the water, children, wade in the water. God's gonna trouble the water. Wade in the water, wade in the water, children, wade in the water. God's gonna trouble the water. See that band all dressed in white, God's gonna trouble the water. It looks like the band of I'm sorry, I lost my words. It looks like the band of the Israelite. God's gonna trouble the water. Sing it with me, children. Wade in the water. Wade in the water, children. Wade in the water. God's gonna trouble the water. See that band all dressed in red. God's gonna trouble the water. It looks like the band that Moses led. God's gonna trouble the water. Oh, wade in the water. Wade in the water, children. Wade in the water. God's gonna trouble the war. One more time, sing it with me. Wade in the water. Wade in the water, children. Wade in the water. God's gonna trouble the water. Thank you. And thank you for singing. I'd like to bring my portion of the program to a close with a quote from Frederick Douglass, who I think you're going to be hearing from in a moment. But this is from his autobiography, in which he describes slave songs as, quote, telling a tale which was then altogether beyond my feeble comprehension. They were tones, loud, long, and deep, breathing the prayer and complaint of souls boiling over with the bitterest anguish. Every tone was a testimony against slavery and a prayer to God for deliverance from chains. Those songs still follow me to deepen my hatred of slavery and quicken my sympathies for my brethren in bonds, end quote. The spirituals then are intimately connected with the whole problem and experience of slavery and the primary means of expressing their current struggles while maintaining contact with the traditions and the meanings of the past. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Marnford. That was just wonderful. I was trying to find something for the conference, for the process, that would give me the kind of weight that would be connecting for you. And one night, as I sat at the computer, I put in the words, Frederick Douglass, slavery, Texas. And we came, I had a hit. I hit the jackpot. There was a speech that Frederick Douglass delivered in 1845 Most people don't realize it took from 1836 to 1845 for Texas to be admitted to the Union, 9 years. And in real time, Frederick Douglass was in England, and he knew what was going on in Texas. I wondered how I could present that lecture to you. And a friend of mine who's here, Karen Sides, told me about a gentleman, and I'm going to tell you about him, the one who's going to bring Frederick Douglass to you. Vincent Hardy has appeared regionally, nationally, and internationally in numerous plays and musicals. Locally at the San Pedro Theater Playhouse, he played Scrooge in A Christmas Carol, and Agui on this island. With the Magic Theater in the Botanical Gardens, he performed Prospero in The Tempest and the Ghost in Hamlet. He toured extensively with Theater Works USA in Babar's Birthday. He toured with the National Shakespeare Company in Taming of the Shrew and Macbeth. With the Shadow Theater Company in Denver, he was the lead in the African Company Presents Richard III. He lived in New York City for 20 years and taught at City College of New York. Hardy holds a Bachelor of Arts degree in anthropology from Northwestern University. He earned an MFA in acting from Cornell University. Currently, he is chair of fine arts and kinesiology at St. Philip's College and is a member in good standing of Actors Equity Association. Vincent Hardy is going to transcend as he walks to the stage, and I ask you to welcome Frederick Douglass.
Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, I rise for the purpose of calling your attention to the subject of the annexation of Texas to the United States. A question may rise in your minds as to what the annexation of Texas to the states has to do with slavery in America. This question I think I shall be able to answer during the remarks I shall make this evening. Texas is that part of Mexico south of Arkansas and extending from the Gulf of Mexico to the Rio del Norte. Its fertility is such that it is estimated as being able to support not less than 20 million of souls. In 1820, this vast territory was subject to the Spanish government. The history of the settlement of Texas by its present population is briefly as follows. In the year just mentioned, Moses Austin of the state of Tennessee, a slaveholding state, obtained a grant from the royal government of Spain to settle in that territory 300 families, on the condition that they should be industrious, sober, upright men, and professors of the Roman Catholic religion. Austin obtained by this grant great advantages to himself, and when he died, his son Stephen Austin became the legal representative of his father and prosecuted the work of settling the 300 families that they might enrich themselves and lay the foundations of wealth for their children. The settlers soon spread abroad reports of the fertility and salubrity of the country, and those reports induced a general spirit of speculation, and thus a way was opened for the practice of the grossest hypocrisy. Many persons were induced from the love of gold to pretend the profession of the Roman Catholic religion, thus obtaining large quantities of land. The territory was chiefly settled by the citizens of the United States, of the slaveholding states, of America. It was early seen by them that this would be a delightful spot to curse with slavery. They accordingly took their families and their slaves to Texas. We do not hear of much confusion in Texas until 1828 or 29, when Mexico proclaimed the deliverance of every captive on her soil, not securing liberty for her own children, but also for the degraded bondsmen of Africa. This act of the Mexican government was resisted at once by the settlers who had carried their slaves into Texas, though they were bound by a solemn agreement to submit to the laws of Mexico. They remonstrated with the government. They said their slaves were too ignorant and degraded to be emancipated. The Mexican government listened and consented that the Texian slaves should be only gradually emancipated under a system of indentured apprenticeship. Even this restriction was evaded by the Texians, making the indentures binding for 99 years. In fact, they showed themselves to be a set of swindlers. Well, Mexico attempted an enforcement of her law, making it impossible for any man to hold an apprentice more than 10 years. This was resisted on the plea that the slaves would not be fit for freedom even then. One would think 10 years long enough to teach them the value of liberty, but these wise Americans could not understand how that could be the case. The Texians still persisted in holding their slaves, contrary to the express declaration of their legislature, contrary to the law of the land, to drive them before the biting lash to their hard tasks day after day without wages. Again, the Mexican government attempted to enforce its law, but then Texas revolts and calls upon the people of the United States to aid her in what they termed their struggle for religious liberty. Understanding the terms upon which the Texians had obtained the territory, and well knowing the exact nature of the contract, here was an act of national robbery perpetrated. And for what? For the reestablishment of slavery on a soil which had been washed pure from its polluting influence by the generous act of a semi-barbarous people. And what are their excuses, their apologies, their reasons? For they always give reasons for what they do. One of them is that Mexico is unable to defend her territory, and that therefore they have a right to take it. Oh, how mean, how dastardly do the American people appear in the light of justice, of reason, of liberty, when this particular point of her conduct is exposed. But here there was a double point to be gained, and on the part of the Southern planters to establish and cultivate large plantations in the South, and on that of the Northern ones to support the internal slave trade, which is said to be worse than the foreign slave trade. This is more horrible still than to prowl along the African shore and carry off thence men with whose faces at least we are unfamiliar, and to whose characters we are strangers. Still, the chief object of the annexation of Texas was the quickening of the foreign slave trade, which is the very jugular vein of slavery. But the cry of slavery is ever, give, give, give. That cry is heard from New England to Virginia. From Virginia, it has gone to North Carolina, and from that to South Carolina, leaving ruin in its train. And now it seizes on the fertile plains of Texas, where it had been previously abolished by a people whom we are wont to call semi-civilized. They say they only want to increase their commerce and add to their security. Oh, what a reason to give for plunder. The pirate of the high seas might make the same excuse. Mankind thinks that whatever is prosperous is right, that what the law has made property is property, and that 200 years of legislation has made the Negro slave property. Justice is nothing. Humanity is nothing. Christianity is nothing. But prosperity is everything. Oh, the love of money, rightly has it been called the root of all evil. 2 years ago, I had hoped that there was morality enough, Christian-mindedness enough, love of liberty enough, burning in the bosoms of the American people to lead them to reject forever the unholy alliance in which they have bound themselves in Texas. America has done all that a nation could do to crush me, but I hope she will yet see that it will be her duty to emancipate the slaves. Let no one accuse me of attempting to stir up a spirit of war. You may accuse me of being an imposter or trying to make money. You may accuse me of what you please, but not of stirring up a war against that land which has done me and my race so much injury. For though, if ever a man had cause to curse the region in which he was born, I am he. Though my back is scarred with the lash of the driver, nature, law, and Christianity bind me to the United States of America.